In Galatians 6:2, we read, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. There's many kinds of burdens that we bear. In this particular verse, it uses the Greek word baris, which means a burden that knocks you down. Similar to when Christ bore the cross, he was knocked down. He couldn't carry it. Another man had to carry the cross for him. It's an overwhelming burden that we cannot carry on our own. And not to be compared to later in the chapter where he says, bear you your own burdens. And that's a different word entirely. It basically means to do your daily work, your daily chores, whatever you can do. But there's many types of burdens. Years ago when I was working, I was at Reed Hospital. I don't know if any of you know where that's at. It's in Richmond, Indiana. And in my job, that particular job, I had to take smoke detectors down and put them in a box. And I'd take them across the hospital and we'd put them in a tester and we'd test the sensitivity to make sure they're safe for that building. So I would, several hundred times a day, I would go out and get smoke detectors and put them and test them and write them down and bring it back. And at the end of the day, I was taking the box to the other side of the hospital because you can't throw a box in the trash because that's recyclable. You got to take it to the recycler bin. So that's about a half mile from where I was. I was tired. My legs were hurting. I carry a little extra weight in case you haven't noticed. And it was a long walk. And I saw this man drop a bunch of items. There were some flowers and cards and some personal items and stuff. And I reached down and I picked them up and put them in a box. I said, what you need is a box, because I'm lazy, basically, and self-centered. I said, you need a box. And I got rid of the box. I'm like, this is great. I got rid of the box. I don't have to walk that extra mile. And he was distraught and upset. You'd think I gave this guy a handful of gold. As I thought about it, as time went by, he was taking home flowers and cards and personal effects because somebody's not coming home. He was horrible, can't talk, terribly distraught, devastated by what's going on in his life. Somebody's not coming home. That was a burden. I helped lift it a little bit by giving him the box. I wish I'd have realized the effect of that burden when I was there and giving him the box. But that box was easing his burden. There are many burdens that we have in life. Physical burdens, as I said, like if somebody told me to move a piano, I could probably push a piano on wheels across the room, not on carpet, but on a smooth surface. But if you ask me to carry it up a flight of stairs, you're going to need a whole lot of people to help me, and probably a couple of paramedics, because I'm going to have to need the paramedics just to get up the stairs, let alone push a piano up there. But I'm going to need help, and we can't carry a physical burden like that. There's also spiritual burdens, and that in this chapter is what is referring to, because he refers to people that are caught up in sin. He's talking about preachers and elders and deacons and such, and supporting them. And part of that support was a spiritual support. We have people in here that are crushed by what is going on in their life in a spiritual nature, whether it's a sin. You have sins weighing you down. We talked about Bernie Madoff tonight. Bernie Madoff could have moved and left the country and then told everybody, and he'd be a free man to this day. I think he's still alive. He may have died. I don't know. It's been a long time. But he could have lived his golden years with billions of dollars of other people's money in another country. But the burden of that sin weighed him down and he confessed. And the prison system's full of that. They ask the jailers, how do you get these people to confess their sins, to confess the crimes, the murders, and things they've done? And police officers will tell you, so this weighs them down. This is crushing them on the inside. They've got to tell somebody. They got to explain their story, their side of the story, try to get this off their chest, because the weight of sin crushes you. And we have relief from that crush. We have relief from that burden with Christ. He carried our burden to the cross for us. It was our burden that he was carrying. It was our burden that was crushing him down when he carried the cross that day. He was carrying our sins. There's also mental burdens that we carry, whether it's the worry of what our sins have done, the weight of the wrong that we've done in our life, the fact that we have issues at home that we're ashamed to even talk about. Josh talked about if you had a spouse, or you're going to get married and somebody was cheating on you, you'd want to know. Well, there's people that live that situation. They're married and that's happening. And they don't have the heart to speak up to you and say, my wife's cheating on me. They're too ashamed of her sin. I'm sorry. I probably should use neutral pronouns in this day and age of all things, but in the other person's sin weighs them down and is crushing them, not because of what they've done, but what someone else has done in their lives. Sometimes it's just the weight of the worries of the world. The news is constantly negative. We talked a little bit about how Christians are persecuted. If you look online, you see it. You see how Christians are attacked, even by our own government sometimes. And it kind of weighs us down, or just the bad news, the economy or whatever, just kind of wears us down, makes us feel mentally defeated. And sometimes we have to struggle with our own internal demons that for some reason, whatever it is, we don't think we're good enough. We're fighting depression. Depression's a real thing. Now, I've heard people tell me, so well, if you're a Christian and you're depressed, then you're committing sin. That's not true. The Bible teaches that it's not true. There were godly men that were depressed. You can't tell me Elijah wasn't depressed. When Jezebel threatened him, he ran away. He ran and hid in a cave. He ran out of the country and asked God to kill him. He says, I'm ready to die. There's no one else, just me. So he got depressed. Abraham, when he saw the fire and the smoke raised from Sodom and Gomorrah, in his head, it doesn't say this, but in his head, I'm thinking he thought his nephew was dead. He went and left to a place he had been 25 years ago and stayed with people that he said he didn't believe feared God because he'd given up. He thought his hope was denied him, that his family was destroyed, that his prayer wasn't answered. Years later, his faith was perfected to the point where he was able to be willing to sacrifice his own son. But not that day. He was depressed. He was shaken. He was knocked down in the disciples. When they took Jesus away to be crucified, some of them ran away, or one of them at least ran away naked. According to the book of Mark, Peter followed him to the cross. And when he looked at Jesus, he broke down and wept because he thought he'd lost everything. So Christians can get depressed, and it happens even after they become Christians. Now, as your faith is perfected, and our faith is a growing process, you'll overcome that. Sometimes there's a chemical imbalance in your body, and you can't overcome it. You need some sort of drug to help you. And I don't advocate that unless that's the last resort, because I've had that in my family. I've seen it destroy family members to where the depression actually destroyed their mental capabilities to understand life around them. So it is a real illness that needs help. And we need to lift each other up. We're commanded to bear one another's burdens. But sometimes we need people to tell us these burdens because they're not speaking up. They're not telling us. We need to lift one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. You know, in the military, there's Recondo School, or Recon School, I should say. It's a training that special forces go through. They say there'll be about 500 people try out for that, and only 50 finish. And out of that 50, only 5 or 10 are chosen to be special forces. But they have the toughest guys in the world, people that are world-class type athletes, or bodybuilders, or muscular, strong, and distant runners, and they fall out of this. They can't make it. The ones that make it in that training are the ones that, no matter how exhausted they are, no matter how fatigued they are, they reach over and lend a hand to the person next to them and help them through that. That's because they have an inner strength. And that's the source. That's the nature of Christians. That when the world has taken us out and the world has knocked us down and defeated us, we find strength in Christ to lift one another up, to build one another up and help them through these difficult struggles. These people have this strength because they have that inner strength. And that's a strength that Christ gives us. The very nature of a Christian is to be able to help one another even when we need it. Some of the bravest people that we have are those people that struggle to come to church because they know that the only healing they have is in this room. They can't look you in the eye when they walk out the door. They can't even hold their head up. They need our help. They won't help. So what do we do? They won't ask us for help. How do we know? You can't look at somebody and say, hey, you're depressed. I right there, you'll see you're depressed. It's not a sign on your forehead. There are signs to look for. When I was helping that man with a box, I didn't see he's depressed. I didn't see he's distraught. I had to put the pieces together in my head, you know, all the little pieces that were laying on the floor there that I was helping him pick up. If I took time to notice, I just saw that he needed help. But there's some things we can do. Jordan Peterson says to ask somebody for a favor, ask somebody for help. This breaks down the barriers between you, and they feel like they can now be empowered to ask you for help. This empowers them, empower one another, strengthen them, give them the ability to help themselves and help each other. That when we serve Christ, when we do what we're supposed to be doing as Christians, it's uplifting and upbuilding to us. I've said it before and I'll say it 1,000 times again. When you visit the shut-ins, when I was a young Christian, I'd visit these people that were shut in. I was like, this is my Christian duty. I have to do this. I found out it wasn't something that I had to do. It was something that my soul needed because I was renewed by visiting them. It wasn't something I was doing for them. They were doing for me. They were lifting me up and making me a better Christian. They were filling me with the richness of their life history. Although sometimes it was extremely painful, it made me stronger. It made me uplifted. It made me better. There's a self-edification or a mutual edification in serving God because it is a two-way street. When we work together, we build one another up. We serve God. So lift one another's burdens and thus fulfill the law of Christ.